and welcome to More to Space Than Air with Ayomide Adefejide. Today I have with me my friend and colleague Hamza HAMEED. Hamza is a legal consultant at the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, UNIDROIT, and the co-chair of the Space Generation Advisory Council, SGAC. Hamza holds an LLM from the International Institute for Air and Space Law at Leiden University, and he teaches spacecraft financing at various universities and is a member of the International Institute for Space Law, IISL, and INSO International. Thank you very much for making time out to be with me today.
Thank you very much, Ayomide, for having me, and thank you for introducing me. It's my pleasure to be on here and speaking with you. You're such a good friend, and we've known each other for a long time. You mentioned where I've done my master's. It's the same place you've done your master's. So very happy to be chatting with you today and looking forward to the discussion.
I can definitely return that pleasure and say that it is mine. I remember my first introduction to you was as my lecturer. So probably not giving away your age, am I? But yeah.
I certainly hope not.
Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm very sure that the audience would really appreciate this opportunity to learn from you and to draw from your wealth of knowledge. I know that I just read a short bio, but if you could just please help me out with a little bit of introduction to Hamza HAMEED, and lead us through your career in space and any other interesting thing you might want to share.
Absolutely. So I'm Hamza. I'm a Pakistani lawyer born and raised in Karachi. I'm 29 years old, and I've been working as part of the Secretariat of UNIDROIT in Rome for the past almost 6 years now. To give you a sense of my background, I studied law in Pakistan until 2015 when I finished my undergraduate, and it came time to decide what I wanted to do for my master's. And then I was quite confused. You know, I always wanted to be an environmental lawyer in the beginning, but then my interests were going here and there. And then I was participating in this Model United Nations debate competition. And I learned about space pollution and the problem of space debris. And I found it to be so fascinating. And I always had a curiosity for outer space. And this was the first time that my curiosity for outer space was sort of converging with my interest in environmental law. And so I went home and I Googled space law. And the first thing I found was a master's program at Leiden. And so I thought, oh, well, you know, I'll just send in an application and see what happens. And I was quite lucky to be accepted. And then I went and did my master's there. And I had a great time. You know, it's a fantastic program, as you also know. And since then, I started becoming more and more involved in the space community, going through different stages of my career. In the middle of my master's, I joined the Space Generation Advisory Council, which is something I know we'll talk a little more about in a little while. And then I got very lucky to find a position at UNIDROIT, which is what I do now. I specialize mostly in space finance and space policy, but also do a lot of work in commercial law with a focus on law and technology. Yeah. I love football. I play a lot of football, and I like sports generally.
We can change the topic of discussion to football, if that's all right.
Hey, I don't mind. I hope you're a Chelsea supporter.
Let's get back on course. Okay, so one of the things you mentioned was your developing interest at the early stage of your career. And my next question to you would be, how did you develop competency in the space industry to be able to do what you do? And an advice to young professionals coming into would be, what is the best way to develop competency?
So I think everyone finds their own path. Everyone discovers things that they're interested in as they build their career, as they go through university, and then as they, move into the job market. For me, during my master's, I had the opportunity to undertake a few internships, and those internships really did sort of help me understand that the type of work that I wanted to do in the long term. In fact, I started doing internships even before I started my master's program. So after finishing my undergraduate, I had the opportunity to do an internship with an airline in Pakistan, and following that, during my master's, I had the chance to work for a new space company based in Barcelona, and then a law firm in London, and then come to Rome to work for an intergovernmental organization. And all of this different type of work experience really allowed me to sort of understand what I wanted to do in the long term. And things also did come to a full circle, at least for me. Growing up in school, in high school, and also during my undergraduate, I used to participate in a lot of Model UNs and debate competitions. And then for me to end up working for an intergovernmental organization and working in diplomacy sort of felt quite correct. And I felt quite at home participating in a lot of those discussions and negotiations, even though the stakes were now completely different. People were real delegates rather than pretend delegates of countries. But I think, everyone finds their own way, and there's nothing wrong with being confused or being unsure about what you want to do, especially when you're early on in your career. I was certainly like that up until a very, very late point. Even now, sometimes I refuse to pick between aviation law and space law, even though I've dedicated a lot of my career to space law. And I think, and that's fine. You live and you learn as you go. So for young professionals and students that are just starting out, I'd recommend to, take a flexible approach and be adaptive and learn from your environment and try to make the most out of any opportunity that comes your way, because you never really know where that leads to.
Wow, you're dropping germs, Hamza. You said two things that I have noted. You've encouraged young professionals to take a flexible approach and to leave it and learn as they grow. Okay. My next question to you is on nationality. How has that been a constraint to your endeavors in the industry? Has it been a constraint, if at all? But what has the experience with nationality been for you?
Yeah, so I'm happy to be completely honest with you on this question, as most certainly it's been challenging. In the space industry, it's important to recognize that many countries deal with space as part of their defense industries, and space and defense often tend to be closely related to each other. Because of this, most work in the space sector in countries such as the United States or also in parts of Europe is subject to export control restrictions and security clearances that are often limited to nationals of their own countries, or even when third country nationals try to apply for these security clearances, it takes a very long time to get them, which makes it very difficult for nationals of third countries to find employment, particularly in the private sector, but also definitely in the public sector, in the space industry. So for me, I always had that challenge coming out of my master's, coming from Pakistan. It was always very challenging for companies to consider me as a good candidate, because even though they liked my profile, I would be a very hard person to get a security clearance for. which is understandable because they know their processes and they know how long these things take. At the same time, obviously, coming from for me, I did my master's in the European Union, and coming from outside the European Union, I also needed to find a work permit and understand how that would my immigration status would change should I pursue a job in Europe. So all of those challenges are real. Everyone coming from outside the EU, from a developing country, or in the US, anyone coming from outside the US has to go through some of these issues. But I would stress that there are different types of companies and different types of organizations out there that do different kinds of work. And while some parts of the industry are a lot harder to break into for people with certain nationalities, other parts are easier. And increasingly, there's been a trend by space companies to now use more equipment and more material that's not subject to export control restrictions and that's not held behind security clearances to allow for a more inclusive workforce. At the same time, there are opportunities that, as a given, exist for everyone. And good examples of these include, for example, the Space Generation Advisory Council, which is, a network for students and young professionals from all nationalities. In fact, we now have more than 175 countries, I think, with members at SGAC. And similarly, going to conferences, attending events, networking, meeting people is not restricted by your nationality. And at the end of the day, from what I've learned, success in the space sector rests a lot on the strength of your network, the types of people you meet, and then the opportunities you try to expose yourself to. And then all of this requires you to go to conferences, requires you to participate in events, which are generally always open to everyone. So while it's entirely true that there are restrictions and challenges based on nationality, particularly if you come from a developing country or an emerging economy in parts of Asia or parts of Africa or even South America, that's not the only thing that will, be looked at when you go out into the market. And then there are opportunities out there for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Hamza. Everything you said, resonates with me deeply and makes me feel like I'm doing the right things. Probably attending the right conferences and networking with the right people. But one of the most profound things I heard was how you were able to break barriers and also be very patient, and at the same time build your credentials to the extent where your merits and your hard work would show for you. And one of the things, especially from someone like me, from a developing country, was your appointment as the co-chair of the Space Generation Advisory Council, SGAC. From an external perspective, that was a big deal. But for you, what did that position mean? What did it mean to you?
Thank you for that question, HAMEED. I think being co-chair of the Space Generation Advisory Council has been one of the most fulfilling and rewarding things I've ever done. I became a member of SGAC back in 2016 when I was completing my master's and had just graduated, and I was in this situation where I found myself unemployed and with little hope for the future, and the only hope, or the only sort of bright shining light that I always saw or experienced, was all of my friends and community at SGAC. Despite however bad things were in for me finding a job, there were people that were doing interesting work, interesting research, and very willing to share their experience and help each other out. And then I found that to be so inspiring. And then I involved myself more with this organization. My journey at SGAC started initially as the national point of contact for Pakistan for 4 years. So I did that from 2016 to 2020. And because I saw this organization doing so much good work for students and young professionals all around the world, I involved myself more and more. And then so in 2018, I joined the SGAC legal team. And in 2020, I was appointed the SGAC General Counsel, which is now a role that you play. And I'm very happy to have you as my successor. All of my activities at SGAC were just always so rewarding. I think that the first big space conference that I was able to attend was thanks to an SGAC scholarship, where I was able to participate at the Asia Pacific Regional Space Agencies Forum that took place in Singapore. And I ended up participating in a lot of other space events and conferences as well in different parts of the world, thanks to SGAC. And this really opened up my space career and in my experiences, and allowed me to meet more people, become more relevant in the industry, and significantly expand my network. And then after becoming general counsel, I started becoming involved in more the executive level and the higher level decision making at SGAC. And some of the things that I was doing, I was just sometimes taking a step back, looking in the mirror and asking myself, did I really just do that? And then a good example of that would be, I remember, so in 2021, SGAC was awarded a $1 million donation from Club for the Future. And being general counsel, I received a call overnight saying, Hamza, I need you to review an agreement. You can't tell anyone, but someone's giving us $1 million. And I'm like, what? Here I am just sitting in my bed, not doing much. And I'm being asked to review $1 million agreement, which was incredible, And for a young professional building my career to be dealing with these types of things, I really enjoyed being part of SGAC and contributing to the community in that way. And so I applied to be co-chair, and I was quite lucky to be elected by my fellow members of the executive committee and then the regional coordinators of SGAC from around the world. And then I started my term as co-chair of the organization last year in April. It is, quite a lot of work, and I do invest a lot of time into my role at SGAC. But at the same time, just being in that position to be able to inspire a lot of students and young professionals and guide them towards building successful careers in the space sector, and in just making space more accessible to people from all around the world is such a rewarding experience. I'm the first co-chair from Pakistan, and I think for people around the world to see that individuals from developing countries, from emerging space economies, can also find themselves in positions such as this, I think is incredible, and is exactly the message that I wanted to send from my candidacy for co-chair, that look, you might come from a part of the world which traditionally hasn't found success in the space industry, but that does not limit your potential and should not limit your growth, because if you put yourself out there and if you do the work, then success does come. So and for me, SGAC has always been a channel for my success and then for all of the work that I've done. And so the opportunity to give back and be in this position is incredible, and I couldn't be happier to be doing it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hamza. You're truly a beacon of light. Thank you for letting us see through your life the things that are very possible and also available to us. Next question for you was, how do you think young professionals can get more involved in SGAC? And I'm going to tie that in with your role with UNIDROIT. What do you foresee that the industry is going? What direction do you think the industry is going? And do you think the industry would be needing a lot of professionals? So how can the young professionals then get involved in order to prepare for themselves for those positions in the future?
There are a lot of opportunities coming up in the space sector at the moment. This is especially because the space sector is going through this new wave of commercialization and, the involvement of private sector companies in the space industry. And all of this is, a consequence of the growth of the new space sector and the incredible reduction in the cost of getting things to outer space and accessibility of orbits for companies from all parts of the world. So I think there are a lot of opportunities out there right now for students and young professionals, and then the number of opportunities will continue to grow. These opportunities are not only in the private sector, but also available in public service. So a lot of countries around the world are setting up their domestic space economies and are building, their local space sectors. And at UNIDROIT, I work directly with governments from different parts of the world with a particular focus on emerging space economies to help them understand space financing with a more asset-based approach. And every time I'm speaking with a government or with a space agency, I always learn that there's so much happening in these countries and there's so much growth that's foreseen that there will be a lot of jobs. If you look at the numbers, then the space sector was one of the few industries that did not shrink during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in fact, investments continue to grow in the space industry. And that's because of the number of applications that space is now delivering. In fact, a study conducted by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, I think, showed that space can be a contributor to each and every one of the Sustainable Development Goals and can add an incredible amount of value to helping countries develop and meet their targets under the SDGs. So I think there's a lot of room to grow and find jobs in the space sector. And young professionals can really use avenues and channels like SGAC to find these jobs. So like I said, for me, being involved with SGAC allowed me to be at conferences, meet people, meet executives in companies, but then also just be part of these networks and channels where job opportunities were being shared. So even now, SGAC has a Slack platform, so a Slack channel dedicated to jobs. We have thousands of members in our Slack space, and there are people posting jobs on there every day, and these jobs include opportunities in engineering, in space science, technology, as well as things such as space law, policy, and others. So I think for young professionals, I'd really encourage you to keep an eye out on places such as LinkedIn, jobs being shared within networks such as SGAC, and just build your community and your network, and you'll see things coming up for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Hamza. I'll just ask the last question and we can call it a day. Okay, so there's currently a notion in the industry about internship. So there's the general position that as a young professional, if you haven't done X amount of internships, then you're probably not really ready to transcend into the next stage of your career. Can you speak about the authenticity of that statement? And must one do a lot of volunteering and internships before they can find their footing in the industry?
Internships allow you to build your skills and sort of serve as this transition from you having studied about things to then you trying to implement those things into a job, right? So they're definitely a learning experience, and that's what the internships that I did were for me. So I ended up doing 3 internships, and then as part of all of them, I had the opportunity to apply a lot of the knowledge that I had gained in my master's and see how those things are relevant practically and what practically was required from a professional working in this area. So the thing that, and that's quite important, right? It's sometimes when you finish your studies, you're not exactly ready to become an employee. You need that stepping stone into the industry, and an internship can be that. I don't think volunteer work is sort of like a bridge into becoming a professional. I think volunteer work is something you should do all the time, you know. For me, for example, I started volunteering well before I got my job, and I have continued to do so even now. And the work that I do as a volunteer allows me to, you know, participate in activities that sometimes my full-time job doesn't, and you know, it allows me to meet people and work with people that have the same passion and share the same excitement for things that I enjoy as well. So for me, it's the space sector, and every time I'm working with people at SGAC as a volunteer, just to see people so excited and motivated about the space industry energizes me. And so I would really encourage people to continue volunteering, you know, even as they move into their professional lives, but obviously stop being an intern, you know, once you've gotten that full-time job. I really do see internships as good learning experiences, and I think, you know, they're a good way for students and young professionals to break into the sector, particularly if they don't have too much work experience. So it's a good opportunity to get that work experience and to find yourself in the middle of a company or an organization, and then see where you can go from there. So yes, do go get those internships. For anyone who's interested in law and policy, UNIDROIT has an internship program that we recruit for every year. So I'd really recommend keeping an eye out on that. And for students and young professionals out there listening to this, I would point out that SGAC has lots of vacancies all the time. So please do go onto the SGAC website and take a look. In fact, right now, we're even recruiting a full-time operations officer to be based out of our offices in Vienna. So, and these types of opportunities are exactly for young people and students in the space sector. So take a look, and if you see anything that's interesting, reach out to me or to HAMEED, and I'm sure we'll help you out. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And on that note, I would like to ask you if you have any closing remarks for us, any last words for the audience.
Yes, I think it's not, you know, space is exciting. We're all here because we share a passion and love for the space sector. And if working in space is something you dream about or something you'd like to do, then don't give up. You know, continue trying, keep looking for opportunities, and I'm sure things will come your way. Motivation, determination, and commitment goes a long way. and people do recognize hard work. So keep at it, keep your head up, and I look forward to seeing all of you somewhere in the space sector at a conference or in the industry, and towards working with you. And if you already haven't done so and are between the age of 18 to 35, go join SGAC. It really opens up networks and it opens up the space society for you.
Yeah. We look forward to comments and questions for Hamza. How can people reach you?
I'm very available. If for anyone looking to reach out to me, please find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and then feel free to send me a message. I'm very responsive on those platforms.
Good. And that's it from us at moretospacethanair. We say thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Bye.